A silent army of stone giants stands watch on islands separated by vast oceans. This is the profound mystery of the cultural exchange that spread megalithic technology worldwide. By the end of our journey, you will see the ancient world not as isolated pockets of humanity, but as a surprisingly connected network. How could the same architectural secrets appear in the fog of Ireland and on the shores of Easter Island? Did master builders sail between continents, or did these ideas simply arise in the human mind time and again? What does it say about us that our ancestors from so many different cultures all felt compelled to move mountains? The sheer ambition of these projects forces us to ask a fundamental question. What exactly are we looking at when we see a circle of standing stones or a massive, chambered tomb? It is easy to call them monuments, but that word alone fails to capture the immense technological and intellectual leap they represent. We are not simply observing big rocks, we are witnessing a complete and sophisticated system of knowledge. This is what scholars call the megalithic phenomenon, and understanding its full scope is the first step in unraveling its global journey. At its heart, megalithic technology is an ancient engineering discipline. It begins with the quarry, the careful selection of the right stone, often from a site miles away. It involves the precise fracturing of bedrock using nothing more than wooden wedges, water, and fire. Then comes the Herculean task of transportation, moving multi-ton blocks across land and sometimes even water, a logistical puzzle that still inspires awe. Finally, there is the assembly, the fitting together of these colossal pieces with a joinery so exact that, in many cases, not even a blade of grass can slip between them. This entire process was achieved without the wheel, without metal tools, and without modern machinery. It speaks to a deep, accumulated wisdom, a set of techniques refined and perfected over generations. But the technology extends beyond mere construction. Look at the placement. Structures like Stonehenge in England or the great tombs of Newgrange in Ireland are not randomly oriented. Their doorways, passages, and keystones align with the rising sun of the solstice or the cycles of the moon. This tells us the builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, an ability to track the slow dance of celestial bodies across the sky and embed that knowledge permanently into the landscape. The stone served as both calendar and cathedral. This leads us to the most profound aspect of the phenomenon, the human element. To move a mountain, even a small one, requires a unified society. It demands planners, overseers, skilled laborers, and the support of an entire community willing to dedicate immense time and resources to a project they themselves might never see completed. This hints at a powerful shared purpose, a cultural mindset that valued permanence, veneration of ancestors, and a connection to the cosmos above all else. The stones are the physical evidence of a belief system so compelling, it motivated people to achieve the seemingly impossible. And as we will see, ideas this powerful have a curious tendency to travel. This ribbon of shared knowledge first becomes visible along the ancient shores of the Atlantic. If we trace a line on a map from the Northern Isles of Scotland, down past the rocky coasts of Ireland, across to the plains of Brittany in France, and further south to the sun-baked cliffs of Portugal, we find a series of echoes in stone. These are not identical structures, but they speak a common architectural language. In Ireland, the Great Mound of Newgrange is a masterpiece of precision. Its entrance is a narrow stone corridor that leads to a central chamber, and above that door rests a unique feature called a roof box. For just a few minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, a slender beam of sunlight pierces through this opening, flooding the inner chamber with golden light. It is a celestial event engineered in stone, a moment of profound connection between the living, their ancestors, and the reborn sun. Hundreds of miles to the south, on the coast of Brittany, stands the sprawling field of Karnak. Here, thousands of individual standing stones are arranged in long, parallel rows that stretch for miles. While their exact purpose remains debated, their alignment with solar and lunar events is undeniable. The scale is different, the form is different, yet the underlying principle is the same: a deliberate, large-scale inscription of astronomical knowledge onto the Earth itself. Further south still, in Portugal, we find the cromlech, circles of standing stones that often surround a central, taller monolith. Many of these are also oriented to mark significant solar positions. Now, the presence of big stones in different places could be written off as parallel invention, a simple case of different people having the same basic idea. But the connections here run deeper. Look at the construction techniques. A corbelled vault is a specific way to build a roof without arches, by stacking stones in ever smaller circles until they meet at the top. This ingenious method appears in the chambered tombs of Ireland, in the burial mounds of Brittany, and in the dolmens of Iberia. Then there are the symbols, the intricate spirals, concentric circles, and zigzag patterns pecked into the stone. These are not random scratches, they are a symbolic repertoire that recurs across this entire Atlantic zone. This repetition of specific techniques, motifs, and celestial alignments points to something more than coincidence. It suggests a transmission of ideas, but how? The answer likely lies in the sea itself. The Atlantic coast was not a barrier to these ancient communities, it was a highway. We know from archaeological evidence that people were moving along these shores, trading goods like polished stone axes, amber, and perhaps even knowledge. Seafaring, even in simple boats, allowed for the slow, steady exchange of concepts. A trader or a group of migrants from one region might share stories of a great tomb that captures the sunrise, or demonstrate a new method for roofing a chamber. The receiving community would then adapt that idea, using the local granite instead of limestone, perhaps combining it with their own ancestral traditions, and creating something that was both familiar and new. This process created a cultural ribbon, a chain of interconnected communities who shared a core set of technological and spiritual principles. They were not a single empire or a migrating tribe, but a network linked by the sea. The megaliths they built were like lighthouses of a shared belief system, visible markers along a coastline that whispered the same secrets about the sky, the earth, and the memory of those who came before. This Atlantic pattern shows us that the megalithic phenomenon could travel, and it traveled best by water. But if ideas could sail across the Celtic Sea, could they have made even longer, more astonishing journeys? Yet this Atlantic network was not the only current of knowledge flowing through the ancient world. If we turn our gaze eastward, to the sun-drenched waters of the Mediterranean, we find the megalithic idea taking on astonishing new forms. Here, the core concept of monumental stonework was not merely copied, it was passionately reinvented, proving its power as a flexible cultural toolkit. The islands of Malta, floating between Sicily and North Africa, hold one of the most profound examples. Here, around 5,000 years ago, a culture with no metal and no written language erected a series of monumental temple complexes. Structures like Hagar Kim and Mnajdra are not simple stone circles, they are sophisticated architectural feats. They feature massive, curved facades, intricate passageways, and central altars, all constructed from colossal limestone blocks. The interiors are designed with apses like the curved ends of a cathedral, and some chambers are acoustically tuned where a deep voice might resonate in a powerful, otherworldly way. These were clearly centers of intense ceremonial life, places where the community gathered for rituals we can only guess at. the Maltese temples show us the megalithic principle evolving beyond tombs and markers into dedicated, complex sacred architecture. Cross the sea to the rugged island of Sardinia, and the idea transforms again. Here, the signature structure is the Nurag, a distinctive stone tower that dots the landscape. Built from basalt or granite, these are dry stone constructions, meaning no mortar holds them together, just the perfect fit of each stone. They often have a central, beehive-shaped chamber with a corbelled roof, a technique we saw in the Atlantic West, but here applied to a completely different purpose. While their exact use is debated, Nurag seem to have been defensive strongholds, community centers, and symbols of power, all rolled into one. They represent the megalithic toolkit being adapted for social structure and territorial control, a shift from purely spiritual monuments to structures that also defined a community's place in the world. Then, on the Greek mainland, the tradition finds expression in the tholoi, the magnificent beehive tombs of the Mycenaean kings. The most famous is the so-called treasury of Atreus at Mycenae. It is a breathtaking display of engineering, with a long, walled entrance passage leading to a soaring, domed chamber built from precisely cut stone blocks. This dome was the largest unsupported span in the world for over 1,000 years. Here, the megalithic craft is in the service of glorifying individual power and creating a permanent, imposing resting place for the elite. The technology is refined to a level of sheer monumental grandeur meant to inspire awe for generations. So what does this Mediterranean pattern tell us? It reveals the dynamic nature of the exchange. This was not a case of a single blueprint being stamped across the landscape by conquerors. Instead, it seems a core set of ideas how to move enormous stones, how to fit them together without mortar, how to create lasting sacred spaces, was carried along trade routes and shared between seafaring peoples. Each culture that encountered this toolkit filtered it through their own unique worldview, their own environmental materials, and their own social needs. For the Maltese, it became the foundation for communal temple worship. For the Sardinians, a means to build imposing towers that shaped their society. For the Mycenaeans, a method to proclaim the eternal glory of their rulers. The stone remained, but its meaning was beautifully, powerfully adapted. This adaptability is the true signature of a living idea, one potent enough to cross seas and take root in the minds of people separated by language and custom. And if this idea could flourish from the Atlantic to the Aegean, a question begins to form, pushing against the edges of the map. Could its journey have been even longer? Across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, a new pattern of stone emerges, one that challenges our understanding of ancient isolation. On the remote, wind-swept island of Rapa Nui, known to the world as Easter Island, the silent, towering moai gaze inland. Their creation represents one of humanity's most extreme acts of communal will, carving nearly 1,000 statues from volcanic rock and transporting them, some weighing over 80 tons, across miles of rugged terrain to their ceremonial platforms. Thousands of miles to the northwest, in the Mariana Islands, another stone tradition stands, the Lotte stones. These are pairs of massive limestone pillars capped with a hemispherical stone, forming the foundational supports for important structures. They are less famous but no less intentional, the product of a society that quarried, shaped, and erected monuments central to their cultural identity. The sheer distance between these island groups and the nearest continents is breathtaking, measured in thousands of miles of open ocean. Yet, the underlying blueprint feels hauntingly familiar, the mobilization of an entire society to quarry, move, and raise monumental stone. When we look westward toward the Asian continent, the echoes grow even stronger. On the Korean peninsula, vast fields of dolmens, stone slab tombs, dot the landscape in numbers that dwarf those found anywhere else in the world. In the verdant hills of northeast India, among the Khasi and Naga peoples, countless menhirs or standing stones were raised, often as memorials to individuals or events. Here, the purpose is clearly connected to veneration and memory, a direct parallel to the motivations we saw in ancient Europe. The geographical scope is now truly global, a ring of stone that runs from the Atlantic shores of Ireland to the Pacific shores of Korea. We are faced with a profound puzzle. The vast oceans and continents that separate these sites were once considered impermeable barriers, yet the architectural language they speak shares a common grammar, leveraging, positioning, and communal effort. This forces a critical and difficult question upon us. How do we explain this? Two major possibilities present themselves, each with world-altering implications. The first is the daring theory of ancient transoceanic contact. Could seafaring cultures possessing knowledge of currents and stars have made voyages of such staggering length that they carried the seed of this idea from one hemisphere to another? Proponents point to the sophisticated maritime traditions of Pacific Islanders, who settled islands across the world's largest ocean using only their knowledge of the waves and the sky. Could a similar, forgotten thread of exploration have connected distant lands in the deep past, allowing for a slow, sporadic exchange of ideas, including how to build with stone on a grand scale? It is a thrilling notion that rewrites the narrative of a disconnected ancient world. The second possibility is more psychological but no less profound. It suggests that the megalithic impulse is not something that was spread, but something that spontaneously arises within human societies under specific conditions. Perhaps when a community reaches a certain level of social complexity, stability, and shared belief, the desire to create a permanent mark on the world, to honor ancestors or forces greater than themselves, manifests in the most durable material available, stone. The methods of moving these stones through levers, ramps, ropes, and collective labor might be rediscovered independently because they are the most logical solutions to a universal human problem: how to make the immovable movable. This theory sees the global pattern not as evidence of contact, but as evidence of a shared human capacity, a kind of cultural convergent evolution. The truth likely resides in a blend of both. Local innovation responding to universal human drives, occasionally accelerated and enriched by long-distance contact and the exchange of ideas. What these Pacific and Asian corridors ultimately reveal is a planet where humanity was far more capable and far more interconnected than our traditional textbooks have led us to believe. The stones are not just local landmarks, they are points on a vast, invisible network of human thought and ambition. They compel us to see the ancient world not as a collection of isolated experiments, but as a single, whispering conversation conducted across millennia and across oceans, with stone as its most enduring vocabulary. The vast distances between these stone traditions demand a credible vessel for the idea itself. If the megalithic concept was a seed, how did it cross oceans? The most compelling answer lies not on land but upon the waves with the forgotten mariners of prehistory. To dismiss ancient seafaring is to underestimate human ingenuity. We have concrete evidence of remarkable maritime achievements long before the age of written records. In the Mediterranean, depictions and archaeological finds point to the use of sturdy reed boats, capable of coastal and even open water journeys. These were not crude rafts but engineered vessels, their buoyant, flexible construction surprisingly seaworthy. Far to the east, in the Pacific, the story is even more profound. Here, the ancestors of the Polynesians developed the outrigger canoe, a masterpiece of nautical design. With sails woven from pandanus leaves and hulls carved from single great trees, these canoes were oceanic spaceships. Their builders possessed a deep, intimate knowledge of the sea, reading the stars, the swell of the waves, the flight patterns of birds, and the subtle shifts in cloud formations to navigate thousands of miles across the trackless Pacific. This was not luck, it was a sophisticated science passed down through generations in song, story, and star charts memorized by master navigators. If people could settle islands scattered across the world's largest ocean, could they not also have carried more than just themselves? Imagine a trading voyage. A large outrigger canoe or a Mediterranean reed ship sets out from a homeland where the people raise great stones. On board are not only shells, obsidian, or precious ornaments, but people, and people carry knowledge. Among the crew might be a skilled stoneworker, someone who knows how to select the right rock, how to shape it with fire and water, how to calculate the leverage needed to raise it. During long nights under unfamiliar stars, stories are shared around a small fire on a distant shore. The visitor speaks of the great tomb of his ancestors, how its doorway captures the first light of the winter sun, and he might even sketch the method for a corbelled roof in the sand. The listeners, leaders, or artisans of a new land are captivated. They see in this idea a powerful expression for their own beliefs, a new way to honor their own ancestors or connect with their own gods. The seed is planted. It does not grow as an exact copy. The new community uses the local granite instead of limestone, or they adapt the technique to build a watchtower instead of a tomb. The core principle, however, the monumental grammar of stone, takes root and flourishes in this new context. This seafaring hypothesis transforms the map of the ancient world from a series of isolated points into a dynamic web of potential connections. It suggests that the oceans were not barriers, but highways for the most precious cargo of all, an idea. And if ideas could sail, then perhaps the most enduring mysteries are not about who built in isolation, but about what they chose to share when they met. Yet this vision of ancient mariners sharing blueprints is not the only way to read the story written in stone. There exists a compelling and perhaps more humbling counter-argument, one rooted in the shared architecture of the human mind itself. Skeptics of widespread cultural exchange ask us to consider a different possibility. What if the urge to build big is simply part of who we are? When a society reaches a certain threshold of stability, when it produces a reliable food surplus and develops a clear social hierarchy, it faces new questions. How does a leader demonstrate authority and unify the people? How does a community express its deepest beliefs about the cosmos and honor those who came before? The answer across many environments may naturally turn toward monumentality. Stone, after all, is the most permanent and imposing material readily available in most landscapes. It resists fire, weather, and time in a way wood or earth cannot. Choosing to build with megaliths, then, might not be a transmitted secret, but a logical, independent conclusion reached by different cultures facing similar social and spiritual needs. This is the concept of convergent evolution, where unrelated species develop similar traits, like the wings of bats and birds, to solve similar environmental challenges. Could the same principle apply to human technology? Consider the powerful social engine of ancestor veneration. In a world where lineage and tradition hold immense weight, creating a permanent, impressive resting place for revered elders becomes a profound communal duty. A massive stone tomb does not just house remains, it makes a statement. It declares, our lineage is ancient and our roots are deep in this land. It becomes a focal point for rituals that bind the living community to their past, reinforcing social cohesion. A chiefdom seeking to solidify its power might sponsor such a project, channeling communal labor into a symbol of its legitimacy. The act of building itself, requiring the coordination of hundreds of people over years, becomes a powerful tool for forging a collective identity. Similarly, the precise astronomical alignments seen in so many megalithic sites could arise independently from a universal human experience. Every culture, everywhere, watches the sun and moon. Noticing the solstices, the points where the sun seems to pause and turn in its journey, is a fundamental observation. marking that moment with something permanent, aligning a tomb doorway or a row of stones to capture that first sliver of light, is a profound way to connect human cycles to cosmic ones, to impose order on the universe. It is a technological response to a spiritual question that many agricultural societies would naturally ask. From this perspective, the global pattern of megaliths is not a map of contact, but a map of similar human conditions. Isolated cultures reaching similar levels of social complexity and grappling with similar existential questions could indeed arrive at similar architectural solutions without ever knowing of each other's existence. The corbelled vault, the lever and roller, the celestial observation, these are not necessarily secrets requiring a master teacher, but intelligent solutions that inventive minds, pressed by the same monumental ambitions, could discover again and again. This argument forces a crucial humility. It asks us to consider that the awe we feel at these sites may not stem from a single, lost civilization of master builders, but from something even more remarkable, the repeated, triumphant expression of a universal human potential. The stones then become less like pages from a single, scattered manuscript and more like similar verses composed in isolation, part of a common song the human spirit seems destined to sing. But if both explanations hold weight, how do we choose between a world connected by boats and a world connected only by common instinct? Perhaps we have been asking the wrong question all along. The strongest evidence for a shared idea lies not in the grand shapes of the monuments, but in the intimate details of their making. To understand the builders, we must look at their toolkits, the specific, repeatable solutions they applied to universal problems of stone. When we compare these methods across continents, the parallels become difficult to dismiss as simple coincidence. Start at the very beginning in the quarry. From the bluestone hills of Wales to the volcanic slopes of Rapa Nui, ancient workers faced the same first challenge: how to free a multi-ton block from solid bedrock. And they often arrived at the same ingenious answers. One widespread technique was fire setting. Workers would build a hot fire directly against the stone face, heating it intensely. Then they would rapidly cool the rock by dashing water against it. This thermal shock causes the stone to fracture along predictable lines, a method documented at quarries in Cornwall in Egypt and suggested by evidence in the Pacific. The tools for the finer work show a similar convergence. The stone maul, a simple but effective hammer made from a harder type of rock, is found in quarries from ancient Britain to Polynesia. It was the universal chisel of the megalithic age. Once freed, the even greater puzzle of transportation began. Here, too, the solutions echo. The use of wooden rollers or log rolling is a logical idea, but its application on a massive scale points to shared practical wisdom. We see evidence for sledges, wooden platforms that could slide over a prepared track of greased logs or even over a slick pathway of wet clay. This method is depicted in ancient Egyptian art and is strongly suggested by the worn landscapes leading to monuments like Stonehenge. Then there is the captivating idea of walking a stone. This involves teams of workers using ropes to rhythmically rock a tall, upright stone back and forth, pivoting it forward with each tilt, effectively making it walk across the landscape. While debated, this technique is described in oral traditions from multiple cultures, including those of the Pacific and parts of Europe, hinting at a common repertoire of solutions for moving the immovable. But perhaps the most telling technical signature is found not in moving the stones, but in locking them together. This is where we move from general problem solving to specific, teachable engineering. Consider the mortise and tenon joint. At Stonehenge, the great horizontal lintels that crown the towering sarsen stones are secured using this method. Stone knobs or tenons were carved on top of the uprights, and corresponding hollows or mortises were carved into the bottom of the lintels. They fit together like a giant, timeless piece of stone joinery. Now travel thousands of miles to the Mediterranean, to the temples of Malta. There, archaeologists have found the exact same technique used to secure massive stone blocks. This is not a vague similarity. It is a specific and sophisticated solution to the problem of stabilizing monumental architecture. Another advanced method is corbelling, the technique of stacking stones in ever smaller circles to form a domed roof without any supporting arches. This appears in the tombs of Ireland's Boyne Valley, in the Nuraghe of Sardinia, and in structures across the ancient world. These are not inventions that would naturally occur to every culture in the same precise form. They are like specialized knots in a sailor's craft, specific knowledge that is learned, practiced, and passed on. When we see this constellation of detailed techniques, fire setting, log rolling, mortise and tenon joints recurring across vast stretches of time and space, the argument for pure independent invention begins to strain. It suggests something more was at play. This technical overlap points to a transmission of practical knowledge, a shared curriculum in megalithic engineering that traveled along with the idea itself. Someone somewhere discovered that heating and cooling stone made it easier to split. That discovery, shared and refined, became part of a global builder's guide, written not on parchment, but in the very fabric of the stones they left behind. This shared fascination with the heavens offers perhaps the most compelling evidence for a connected ancient world. Across continents, the stones do not merely stand, they point. They frame specific moments in the endless cycle of the sky, transforming silent rock into a sophisticated cosmic clock. At Newgrange in Ireland, the entire monument is engineered for a single, fleeting event. For 17 minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, a slender beam of sunlight travels down a long, narrow passageway to illuminate the deepest inner chamber. This was not an accident. It required precise astronomical observation, advanced understanding of solar movement, and meticulous architectural planning to achieve. Half a world away, on the island of Malta, the temples of Mnajdra tell a similar story. Here, the rising sun on the spring and autumn equinoxes shines directly through the main doorway, casting a beam of light that aligns perfectly with a central axis inside. In the highlands of Kenya, the Namaratunga stone pillars are arranged to mark not the sun, but the stars, specifically certain key stars and the moon's path, creating a calendar etched into the landscape. These sites, separated by geography and culture, are all engaged in the same profound dialogue with the cosmos. Astronomy provided a universal language, a set of predictable patterns that every human community, regardless of language, could observe and seek to understand. The sun's journey marked the seasons for planting and harvest, the moon's phases dictated the rhythm of time, and the fixed stars offered a constant, navigable map. Building structures to capture these celestial events was the ultimate act of bringing cosmic order down to Earth. It made the intangible tangible, but the knowledge required to do this was not simple. It was a complex science. To align a doorway to capture the solstice sunrise, the builders needed years, perhaps generations, of careful observation. They needed to mark the horizon, track the sun's northernmost and southernmost rising points, and understand the solar year's precise length. This was the work of specialists, individuals who dedicated their lives to watching the sky. In many ancient societies, these were the astronomer priests, the intellectuals and keepers of sacred time. They held a position of immense importance, as their predictions governed the agricultural cycle and the timing of vital community rituals. This is where the idea of cultural exchange gains powerful traction. If such a person, a master of the sky, traveled with traders or migrated with a group, they carried a priceless commodity, knowledge. They could share not just how to move a stone, but why to place it in a specific relationship to a star or a sunrise. This knowledge was practical, spiritual, and politically powerful. A community that could demonstrate control over the calendar, that could predict the turning of the seasons and stage rituals in alignment with the heavens, would solidify its authority and cohesion. The techniques of megalithic astronomy could have been a prized component of exchange, a secret science passed between elite circles. The recipient culture would then adapt this celestial blueprint to their own landscape, using local mountains or distinctive stones on the horizon as their markers, but following the same core principles. The universal language of the sky may have provided the syntax, while the shared grammar of stonework provided the means to write it down permanently for all to see. This convergence suggests that when ancient peoples met, they may have found common ground not just in trade goods, but in a shared awe of the universe above them, an awe they both expressed in the most enduring language they knew. The stones themselves often whisper in a language of shapes, carved into their weathered surfaces. From the tombs of Ireland's Boyne Valley to the standing stones of Iberia, we find a recurring vocabulary of symbols. Spirals that seem to turn inward forever, concentric circles rippling out like water from a dropped stone, and sharp, dynamic zigzag patterns. These are not random decorations. They appear with such consistency across vast distances that they hint at something profound, a symbolic exchange that traveled alongside the engineering know-how. This suggests the transfer was about much more than just moving rock. It was a package deal of culture, belief, and meaning. Think of it this way: if a master builder sailed to a new shore, he did not arrive as just an engineer. He arrived as a whole person, carrying the stories of his homeland, the rituals of his people, and the visual symbols that held deep significance. The spiral might represent the journey of the soul, the cycles of life and death, or the swirling motion of the cosmos. Concentric circles could symbolize community, ripples of influence, or perhaps the sun itself. Zigzags might depict water, lightning, or the path of spiritual energy. While we cannot decode their exact meaning with certainty, their widespread use points to a shared symbolic language, a form of proto-writing that communicated complex ideas about the world and what lies beyond it. This transforms our understanding of the exchange. It was not a cold transfer of technical specifications like downloading a blueprint. It was the sharing of a worldview. The technology to build a massive tomb was inseparable from the reason to build it: to honor ancestors, to mark celestial time, to create a permanent gateway between worlds. The symbols etched into the stone were the visual liturgy of that belief. When a community adopted the megalithic toolkit, they were likely adopting and adapting this entire symbolic and spiritual framework. They might use the local artistic style, but the core motifs remained because they carried the weight of the idea. This holistic transmission helps explain the powerful cohesion we see across the megalithic world. The stones were not just feats of engineering, they were three-dimensional sermons, built from a shared grammar of form and symbol. This deep cultural package makes the idea of sporadic, long-distance contact even more compelling, for it suggests that when ancient peoples met across the sea, they shared not just techniques but truths. Two sites stand as monumental bookends to this global conversation, separated by an ocean but speaking in a strangely similar tongue. In the misty fields of Karnak on the coast of Brittany, thousands of slender standing stones march across the landscape in eerie, precise rows. They are silent, abstract, and profoundly mysterious, a vast geometric puzzle laid out upon the earth. Now, let your mind travel over 12,000 miles across the Pacific to the remote, wind-swept shores of Easter Island. Here, the moai, those brooding, giant-faced statues, stand with their backs to the sea, gazing inland from their stone platforms. They are figurative, intensely human in form, yet they share a deep and resonant kinship with the menhirs of Karnak. Both sites are acts of staggering communal effort, requiring the coordinated labor of entire societies over generations. Both exist in a kind of profound isolation, Karnak on a rugged coastal fringe, Easter Island in the planet's most remote inhabited spot. Most importantly, both are widely understood by researchers as profound expressions of ancestor veneration. The rows at Karnak are thought by many to form a vast ceremonial landscape, a connective tissue between the living community and the realm of those who came before. The moai, scholars believe, are not gods but deified ancestors, their imposing faces and towering presence meant to watch over the living descendants, their mana or spiritual power forever blessing the land. This parallel in core purpose is what makes the comparison so electrifying. It presents us with two solutions to the same human equation. One culture chose abstraction, expressing lineage and memory through the pure, ordered geometry of countless identical stones. Another chose representation, carving the essence of their forebears into towering, specific visages. Yet both felt the same compelling need to permanently inscribe that memory onto the very land they inhabited, using the most durable material they could master. The geographical distance is immense, but the cultural distance in motivation feels startlingly narrow. This invites a tantalizing thought. Could these be divergent branches, wildly different artistic expressions, sprouting from an ancient, shared root? Perhaps that root was not a specific building plan, but a foundational idea, a tradition that held that honoring ancestors required not just words or temporary shrines, but a permanent, monumental transformation of the world itself. This idea, whether carried by long voyaging minds or born independently from a universal human need, found two breathtakingly different, yet fundamentally kindred forms of stone. The silent conversation in stone continues along an ancient highway of mountains and steppes. From the rugged highlands of the Caucasus, between the Black and Caspian Seas, all the way across the vastness of Asia to the forested hills of the Korean peninsula, a single, simple form repeats itself with startling consistency: the dolmen. These are the stone table tombs, monuments of breathtaking simplicity and power. Picture a massive, flat capstone, often weighing many tons, resting like a giant's tabletop upon two or more upright supporting stones. This basic blueprint appears in thousands upon thousands of examples along this corridor, creating one of the most compelling case studies for the slow migration of an idea. In the Caucasus, these dolmens dot the landscape, frequently clustered in groups on hillsides or along river valleys. Many feature a perfectly circular porthole carved into one of the upright stones, a precise and symbolic entrance to the chamber within. Travel thousands of miles east to Korea, and you will find one of the densest concentrations of dolmens on Earth. Here, they are known as goindol, and they share that same essential architecture, a heavy capstone raised above the earth on sturdy legs. The Korean examples display remarkable variety, some built above ground like stone tables, others partially buried with only the massive capstone visible, but the family resemblance is unmistakable. This is not a vague similarity of purpose. It is a specific architectural echo resonating across a continent. How do we explain such a precise parallel over such a forbidding distance? The answer seems to lie in the map itself. Between these two regions stretches the Great Eurasian Steppe, a vast corridor of grasslands that, for millennia, served as a highway for nomadic peoples, traders, and migrating communities. This was not a void but a connective tissue of the ancient world. Ideas, technologies, and cultural practices could travel along this route, carried slowly and steadily by groups on the move. The dolmen, as a funerary concept, appears to have been one of those traveling ideas. Think of it as a profound cultural package concerning the afterlife. The practice of constructing these substantial stone tombs likely revolved around honoring important individuals, perhaps chieftains or elders, and creating a permanent, protected resting place that would stand for eternity. The very weight of the capstone was both practical, securing the chamber, and symbolic, representing the permanence of memory and the solidity of the lineage. What we may be witnessing along this step corridor is the diffusion of a specific tradition for commemorating the departed. A community migrating eastward would bring with them not only their tools and languages but their rituals for honoring those who had passed. They would teach the next generation how to select the right stones, how to position them, and perhaps the meaning behind the porthole or the orientation of the tomb. As they interacted with new groups, traded, and intermarried, this practice would be adopted and adapted, slowly spreading its reach. The sheer number of dolmens in Korea suggests the idea did not just arrive, it took deep root and flourished, becoming a central part of the cultural landscape for centuries. This pattern offers a different model of exchange than the seafaring networks of the Atlantic or Mediterranean. Here, the transmission was terrestrial, gradual, and carried in the collective memory of moving people over countless generations. It shows us that the megalithic phenomenon was not a single event, but a versatile set of ideas that could spread by foot as well as by sail, following the hidden pathways of human movement across the face of the world. The idea of a single, forgotten teacher is powerfully seductive. Faced with these global echoes, one of the most persistent theories suggests a common source, a lost civilization of master builders. Perhaps it was Atlantis, described by Plato, or another sophisticated culture whose lands now lie beneath the sea. In this narrative, these advanced people sailed the world in a forgotten golden age, planting the seeds of monumental architecture before their own society met a sudden, catastrophic end. Their disappearance left behind only the mysterious stone lessons, scattered like chapters from a drowned library. This story holds immense appeal in our popular imagination. It offers a clean, elegant solution to a messy, global puzzle. Instead of countless independent discoveries or a slow, tangled web of exchanges, everything traces back to one brilliant origin point. It transforms the megaliths from local achievements into fragments of a grander, more romantic mystery, the legacy of a world we lost. From a storytelling perspective, it is undeniably compelling. Yet, when we turn from narrative to the hard ground of archaeology, the evidence for such a civilization simply vanishes. Mainstream scholarship remains deeply skeptical, not out of closed-mindedness, but because of a fundamental principle: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. After centuries of exploration, no concrete trace of this global teacher has been found. There are no suddenly identical artifacts, no abrupt technological revolutions appearing worldwide at the same moment, and no genetic or linguistic markers pointing to a single, dispersing population. The megalithic phenomenon itself shows the opposite pattern: a gradual, organic spread and adaptation of ideas over thousands of years, with each region adding its own distinct cultural signature. The true story, while perhaps less mythic, is profoundly more human. It speaks to our innate capacity for innovation and our deep desire to connect. The exchange likely happened through countless small encounters, traders sharing techniques, migrating groups carrying traditions, and local genius adapting foreign concepts to local needs. This process was slow, complex, and beautifully decentralized. It suggests that the ancient world was not taught by a single master, but was a vibrant network of peers, learning from one another and independently reaching for the sky, leaving behind not the ruins of a lost empire, but the shared monuments of our collective human ingenuity. Stone is a story of permanence, but the people who moved it were often living through profound change. The ancient world was not a static stage, but a dynamic landscape shaped by a powerful, unseen force, the climate. Periods of dramatic environmental shift may have been the hidden engine behind the spread of these monumental ideas, turning entire populations into carriers of a Stone Age technology. Consider a pivotal moment known as the Holocene climatic optimum, a time several thousand years ago when global temperatures were warmer than today. For some regions, this brought abundance, but as this period waned, it triggered a cascade of change. In many areas, particularly in the northern latitudes and continental interiors, the climate became drier. Reliable water sources vanished, forests retreated, and the land could no longer support dense, settled communities. Faced with such hardship, people had to make a choice, adapt or move. And when they moved, they carried everything they were, their languages, their stories, their social structures, and their most advanced practical knowledge, including how to build with monumental stone. This was not a planned migration of conquest, but a slow, relentless dispersal driven by necessity. A community that once raised dolmens on a now parched plateau might fracture into smaller groups, each traveling in search of fertile valleys or coastal estuaries. When they finally settled in a new land, perhaps encountering other groups with different traditions, the act of building in stone became more than a religious practice. It became a powerful act of cultural reaffirmation. Erecting a circle of standing stones or a chambered tomb in unfamiliar territory was a way to plant a flag of identity. It declared, "We are still here. Our ancestors are with us. Our understanding of the cosmos remains true." The stone served as an anchor in a world of flux, a durable touchstone to a remembered homeland and a stable past. Simultaneously, another climatic force was reshaping the world's coastlines and pushing humanity outward, the Great Melt. As the last ice age retreated, colossal volumes of water were released, causing global sea levels to rise for thousands of years. This was not a gentle process, it was a slow-motion inundation that redrew the map of continents. Vast coastal plains, rich with resources and likely home to many early communities, were gradually swallowed by the sea. Legends of lost lands and great floods found in cultures worldwide may echo this profound, shared experience. But this rising water did more than erase land, it also created it. As seas climbed, what were once hills on a coastal plain became islands, and peninsulas were severed from the mainland. This new archipelagic world presented both a crisis and an incredible opportunity. For communities with even basic maritime skills, the emerging islands were visible temptations, new territories rich in fish, birds, and isolation. The need to explore, to find new resources as old homelands vanished, and the very creation of island stepping stones would have spurred an age of maritime experimentation. Boat technology improved out of necessity. Knowledge of currents, winds, and celestial navigation became matters of survival and expansion. In this context, the megalithic toolkit became the perfect cultural cargo for colonizing voyages. It was a technology based on materials you could find almost anywhere: stone. You did not need to bring it with you, you simply needed the knowledge to use it. A group setting sail for a new island, perhaps one created by the very seas that displaced them, would carry in their collective memory the techniques for quarrying, shaping, and raising stone. Upon making landfall, establishing a sacred space aligned with the sun or moon was one of the first orders of business. It was a way to consecrate the new territory, to establish a ritual center, and to assert a connection to the cosmic order from their ancestral home. The monument was a declaration that they belonged there, that this new island was now part of their world, woven into their story. So we begin to see the megaliths not as the static achievements of settled, prosperous societies, but often as the dynamic markers of resilient, displaced ones. They represent a brilliant adaptation, a way to translate a fragile human culture into the most permanent language available, ensuring that no matter where the winds or the waters pushed them, their identity, their memory, and their place in the universe would remain unshakably set in stone. The true monument was not the stone itself, but the society that could move it. To transform a concept into a standing circle required a social engine of immense power, a living machine of coordinated human effort. This is the often overlooked dimension of the exchange, the transfer of social technology. The knowledge of how to split a rock with fire was useless without the equally sophisticated knowledge of how to organize, feed, and inspire the hundreds of hands needed to pull it. The spread of megalithic architecture, therefore, may have carried with it a blueprint for a new kind of community. Think of the logistics involved, even for a single, modest standing stone. First, a leader or a council of elders must decide to undertake the project, committing the community's resources for months or even years. Then, specialists must be designated, the quarry masters who know the rock, the route planners who survey the land, the rope makers and sled builders. The broader population, likely farmers and herders, must be mobilized during seasonal lulls in the agricultural calendar, their labor directed and sustained. This demands not just authority, but a shared, compelling purpose that convinces people to contribute their sweat to something they may never see finished. It requires a system for distributing food and shelter to the workers, a form of early project management that tracks progress and solves problems. This entire invisible architecture of cooperation is what turns an idea into a monument. The models for this social engine could have varied dramatically across cultures, and each model was a portable, powerful idea in itself. In one region, the driving force might have been a charismatic spiritual leader, a figure who could interpret the will of the ancestors or the gods, framing the construction as a sacred duty essential for the community's survival and favor. Their vision provided the unifying why. In another, authority might have rested with a skilled engineer chief, a practical genius whose demonstrated ability to solve technical problems commanded respect and organized labor along almost military lines. Yet another society might have operated on a more communal, democratic model, where the decision to build was reached collectively, and labor was a rotating duty shared by all families as a contribution to the common good. Each of these social templates, a way of structuring people and purpose, was as much a piece of technology as the wooden roller. When we consider cultural exchange, then, we must think beyond the movement of artifacts or even techniques. A visiting group, perhaps from a society that built great tombs, would not just show how they set stones, they would embody a way of being organized. They would demonstrate a hierarchy, a division of labor, a method for communal decision-making that made such grand acts possible. For a neighboring or host community observing this, the attraction might be twofold: the impressive stone result and the powerful social cohesion that produced it. Adopting megalithic construction could have been a way to adopt a new, more complex and effective form of social organization, one that strengthened leadership, solidified group identity, and created a visible, enduring symbol of that unity. The stone, in the end, is the proof of the society. Its permanence is a testament to a temporary but magnificent human agreement, a moment when hundreds of individuals aligned their efforts toward a single, staggering goal. The global pattern of these stones suggests that this particular form of agreement, this social technology for achieving the impossible, was an idea that proved just as compelling and just as transportable as the method for moving a mountain. It was a vision of what people, united by a common belief, could truly do. The massive stones could not speak, but the people who raised them certainly did. In a world without written blueprints or engineering manuals, the survival of such a complex craft depended entirely on the human voice, on memory, and on the sacred duty of teaching. This was the domain of the oral tradition, the living library that carried the megalithic idea across seas and centuries. The precise angle for a corbelled vault, the chance for coordinating a pull, the rituals for consecrating a site, these were not written down, they were sung, recited, and performed. They were the essential software without which the stone hardware was just a pile of rock. This knowledge was likely guarded and curated by specialized groups, perhaps guilds of master masons or particular families where the craft was a hereditary birthright. Within these circles, apprenticeship was not a casual study, it was a profound initiation. A young learner would not simply be told how to split stone with fire, he would be shown, his hands guided, the specific song for the timing of the water dash taught until it was etched into his bones. The techniques were woven into stories that gave them meaning, linked to myths of gods and heroes that explained why a doorway must face the solstice sunrise. This transformed practical engineering into sacred lore, making it unforgettable. We catch glimpses of this living tradition in cultures that preserved their stone working skills into the modern era. On the island of Nias in Indonesia, well into the 20th century, communities continued to erect massive stone monuments for ceremonial purposes, using methods passed down orally for generations. The master builders, known as the heir, directed operations using a refined vocabulary of chants and commands, coordinating dozens of men to move monoliths with ropes and wooden levers in a precise, rhythmic ballet. Their knowledge was a complete system, encompassing everything from selecting the right tree for rollers to the feast that must follow a successful raising. This is a powerful window into the ancient past. It shows us that the transmission of megalithic technology was not a dry transfer of data, but a holistic cultural immersion. A master traveling to a new land would not just bring his hands, he would bring his songs, his stories, and his entire way of seeing the world. The apprentice in a new community learned more than a skill. He inherited a worldview, a connection to a lineage of builders that stretched back into the deep past. This oral framework was remarkably resilient. It could adapt to new languages, incorporate local deities, and adjust to different types of stone, all while preserving the core technical principles. The song might change its words, but the rhythm that guided the pull remained the same. This fluid yet durable system of knowledge is what allowed the megalithic phenomenon to be both consistent in its fundamentals and beautifully diverse in its expressions. It was a living thread of memory passed from mentor to student, from one generation to the next, ensuring that the language of stone would never be forgotten, no matter how far its speakers traveled. But the stories passed down through generations are not the only threads connecting us to these builders. A far older record exists, one written not in song or stone, but within the very cells of the people themselves. This is the revolutionary field of archaeogenetics, and it is allowing us to trace the ancient journeys of populations with a precision once thought impossible. By extracting and analyzing minute traces of ancient DNA from skeletal remains found in megalithic tombs, scientists are beginning to read a biological map of prehistory. One of the most significant findings in Europe points to a profound demographic shift that began around 9,000 years ago. Genetic evidence reveals a large-scale movement of people from the region of Anatolia, in what is now Turkey, spreading slowly northwest into the heart of the continent. This migration wave coincides almost perfectly with the archaeological evidence for the spread of agriculture, a package of new plants, animals, and a settled way of life. The genetic signal is clear. These were not just ideas traveling in isolation, but entire communities on the move, carrying their way of life with them. This is where the story of the stones gains a powerful new layer. The early megalithic monuments of Atlantic Europe begin to appear not long after this genetic and agricultural frontier arrives. The timeline is suggestive. Could these migrating groups, with their new social structures and shared worldview, have also been the carriers of the conceptual seeds for monumental construction? Genetics alone cannot tell us if a specific person knew how to carve a mortise and tenon joint. What it can do is map the highways of human movement, showing us the paths along which knowledge most likely traveled. When we see a genetic lineage spreading from one region to another, and we find a similar cultural expression, like megalith building, appearing along that same route shortly thereafter, the connection becomes far harder to dismiss as mere chance. It paints a picture of a dynamic, interconnected Neolithic world. People were not static. They migrated, they mixed, they exchanged goods, and they undoubtedly exchanged ideas. The biological evidence from the tombs is beginning to put faces and family trees to the anonymous builders. It suggests that the spread of the megalithic phenomenon was not a ghostly diffusion of abstract concepts, but was intimately tied to the ebb and flow of human populations themselves. The stones may have been raised by the descendants of newcomers, by local communities inspired by them, or more likely, by a blended society born of that ancient meeting. This genetic narrative does not simplify the story, it enriches it, adding the vital, human element of migration and mixture to our understanding of how a world of stone came to be. Language itself may hold the faintest echoes of this ancient conversation. While stone endures for millennia, words are more fragile, changing and splitting as communities grow apart. Yet, linguists who study the deep past propose a fascinating possibility that the very terminology of megalithic construction might have traveled alongside the techniques. By comparing words across related languages and reconstructing their oldest known forms, scholars can sometimes glimpse a shared ancestral vocabulary. This field, called historical linguistics, cautiously explores whether different language families separated by vast distances might preserve ancient, common words for stone, for building, or for specific tools. The idea is compelling, if highly speculative. Think of a master builder arriving in a new land. He does not communicate through gestures alone. To teach, he must name things. He points to a specific type of durable granite and gives it a name. He demonstrates a stone mall and calls it something. The local apprentices adopt these terms, weaving them into their own language, perhaps altering the sounds over generations but retaining the core. If this happened repeatedly across a wide area, traces of that original technical jargon might persist like linguistic fossils. For instance, some researchers have pointed to potential connections in words for certain types of monumental stones across the Indo-European language family, which stretches from Europe to India. Others look for deeper, more controversial links between language families that seem to have no recent connection. Finding a shared root word for a specialized concept like a corbelled roof or a lever would be a profound clue. It would suggest the exchange was not a silent mimicking of actions, but a full, articulate transfer of knowledge, complete with its own precise dictionary. The technology came with a vocabulary, a set of shared terms that allowed the complex ideas of engineering and astronomy to be discussed, refined, and passed to the next generation. This embedding of knowledge into language is what transforms a borrowed skill into a lasting cultural tradition. It moves the idea from the hands into the mind and the mouth, making it a permanent part of how a people see and describe their world. While proving such connections across the abyss of deep time is enormously difficult, the search itself reframes our understanding of the exchange. It asks us to listen not just to the silence of the stones, but for the ghost of a forgotten word, a single syllable that might have been spoken on a windswept shore in Brittany and again on a sun-baked plateau in India, carrying the same monumental idea. The immense effort required to raise these stones finds its ultimate justification in the realm of the spirit. Beyond engineering and astronomy, the most powerful component of this global exchange may have been a revolutionary idea about how to connect with the unseen. These structures were not merely buildings, they were instruments of ritual designed to bridge the gap between the living community, the ancestral past, and the cosmic forces that governed their world. The exchange of megalithic technology, then, was far more than a trade in techniques. It was the transmission of an entire spiritual worldview, one that demanded stone as its sacred language. Think of the chambered tomb, a form that appears from the Orkney Islands to the Korean peninsula. Its architecture creates a profound experience. To enter, one must often crawl or stoop through a low, dark passageway, a symbolic journey leaving the world of light and life behind. Emerging into the central chamber, a space often acoustically alive, the participant would be surrounded by the tangible presence of the ancestors, their remains resting in niches within the very bones of the earth. The structure itself facilitated the ritual, making the connection feel immediate and real. Similarly, the solar alignment of a site like Newgrange transforms a celestial event into a communal spiritual moment. The penetration of sunlight into the deepest, darkest chamber on the shortest day of the year is a dramatic metaphor for rebirth, for the promise that the light and life would return. Witnessing this engineered miracle would have been an act of powerful collective faith, reinforcing the belief that the community, through its ritual and its monuments, held a role in maintaining the cosmic order. This suggests that what traveled between cultures was a compelling new religious package. A charismatic individual or a group of spiritual innovators might have preached a doctrine that required a new kind of sacred space. They taught that to properly honor the ancestors, to effectively commune with the gods of the sun and moon, or to secure the fertility of the land, the people must build permanently and monumentally. The act of construction itself became a grand ritual of devotion, a years-long ceremony of collective effort that bound the society together under a shared spiritual purpose. For local leaders, adopting this new ideology was a strategic masterstroke. By sponsoring the construction of a massive stone circle or tomb, a chieftain could position themselves as the indispensable intermediary between the people and the powers of the cosmos. They provided the vision, organized the labor, and presided over the ceremonies held at the completed site, cementing their authority in both earthly and spiritual terms. The stone became proof of their special connection to the divine. The faith required to motivate such work was absolute. It was a belief system that saw the landscape itself as alive and sacred, where certain hills, rivers, and rock outcrops held inherent power. The megalithic structure acted as a focal point, amplifying and channeling that terrestrial energy while tethering it to the cycles of the sky. This was a religion of alignment, of harmony, of finding one's place within a vast, living universe. The quiet endurance of the stones served as a perpetual reminder of that covenant, a permanent altar that required no upkeep, only reverence. When this ideology was shared, it traveled as a complete system, the architectural principles inseparable from the rituals they enabled and the beliefs they expressed. A community that embraced the megalithic toolkit was not just learning to move rock, they were learning a new way to pray, to remember, and to find their place in an infinite cosmos. The stones were the ultimate act of faith, a belief made manifest in the most durable material our world provides. Yet even the most profound conversation must eventually fall silent. The age of stone, which spanned millennia, did not last forever. Across the globe, the great projects slowed, then stopped. The quarries grew quiet, and the knowledge of how to walk a mountain faded from living memory. This was not a single catastrophic event, but a gradual fading like a star dimming at dawn. So why did this universal practice, this shared language of stone, eventually fall out of use? The answer lies in a fundamental shift in the very materials of civilization itself. The discovery of metal, first bronze and then iron, revolutionized the ancient world in ways stone could not. Metal was not just a new substance, it was a new form of power. It could be cast into intricate shapes, honed to a sharp, durable edge, and melted down and remade. This shifted the focus of resources and ingenuity. The immense communal effort once directed toward raising a monolith for the ancestors could now be channeled into forging swords for warriors, crafting coins for trade, or producing ornate personal jewelry that displayed individual status. Wealth and influence became more portable, more personal, and often more tied to conflict. The social engine that once built for eternity began to build for more immediate, earthly ends. Alongside this technological revolution came an evolution in belief, the spiritual worldview that demanded permanent, communal altars in the landscape began to change. In many regions, religious thought moved toward more personal or portable forms of worship. deities became less tied to specific, immovable places in the earth and more associated with the heavens or with idols that could be carried. The focus shifted from honoring ancestors in a collective tomb to seeking individual salvation or favor from gods who could be worshipped in a home shrine or a temple that required different, often more refined, materials like carved wood or precious metals. The massive communal project, which required absolute unity of purpose, became less relevant to a society where spiritual life was becoming more individualized. There is also the sobering possibility that the megalithic impulse, in some places, carried the seeds of its own decline. The very act of monumental construction placed immense strain on the environment. To move a single moai on Easter Island required vast quantities of timber for rollers, levers, and sledges. As the statue-building fervor continued, the island's once lush palm forests were systematically cleared. This likely led to soil erosion, the loss of habitat for native species, and a crippling shortage of wood for building canoes for fishing or for basic shelter. The society that had invested everything in carving giants from the mountain may have inadvertently undermined the ecological foundation that supported its people, leading to food shortages, social conflict, and a collapse that left the statues standing sentinel over a broken landscape. This serves as a poignant reminder that no cultural phenomenon, no matter how widespread or spiritually potent, exists in a vacuum. It is subject to the pressures of new technology, evolving beliefs, and the finite resources of the world it inhabits. The end of the Megalithic Era was not a failure but a transformation. The drive to create, to connect with the divine, and to leave a mark did not disappear. It simply found new expressions in metal, in text, and in new forms of architecture. The stones were left behind not as abandoned failures, but as silent teachers from a concluded chapter, their lessons in unity, astronomy, and ambition waiting to be rediscovered by ages that would walk a very different world. The silent stones are finally beginning to speak, their secrets unlocked not by shovels but by beams of light. Our modern era is witnessing a quiet revolution in archaeology, one where the most profound discoveries are being made from the air and from space, fundamentally reshaping our map of the ancient world. This new frontier is driven by technologies that see what the human eye cannot. At the forefront is LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. Imagine an aircraft flying over a dense, impenetrable jungle canopy in places like Cambodia or the rainforests of Central America. It sends down millions of laser pulses every second. These pulses penetrate the smallest gaps between leaves and vines, bouncing off the ground below and returning to a sensor. By stripping away the digital forest, researchers are left with a breathtakingly precise three-dimensional map of the actual Earth surface, and what is being revealed is staggering. In regions long thought to be pristine wilderness, LiDAR is uncovering vast, planned urban landscapes, complete with roadways, reservoirs, and previously unknown megalithic structures, all hidden for centuries. These are not just new sites, they are entire lost chapters of human settlement, suggesting networks of cultural activity far more extensive than we ever dreamed. Meanwhile, on the windswept plains of Europe, another tool is listening to the whispers beneath the grass. Ground-penetrating radar works like a medical scan for the Earth. By sending radio waves into the soil and measuring the echoes that bounce back, it can detect anomalies, voids, and changes in density. This allows archaeologists to peer into the heart of a great earthen barrow or a stone circle without ever breaking ground. They are finding hidden burial chambers, internal stone arrangements, and ceremonial pathways that have been sealed for over 5,000 years. This non-invasive technology is revealing that many of these famous monuments are far more complex than their surface appearance suggests, like discovering secret rooms in a house you thought you knew completely. Even further above, the silent gaze of satellites is scanning the most remote and inhospitable places on Earth. High-resolution imagery can identify subtle patterns in vegetation growth or slight variations in soil color that hint at buried structures below. In the vast deserts of the Arabian Peninsula or the Sahara, where the surface offers few clues, these orbital eyes are pinpointing potential megalithic sites, circles of stone waiting to be documented that were previously invisible. Each new pin on the map is a potential data point in a global puzzle. This technological leap is doing more than just adding dots to a map. It is changing the very scale of the question. By revealing the true density and sophistication of megalithic cultures in regions we underestimated, these tools are providing a much richer, more interconnected picture of the ancient world. A newly discovered alignment in Southeast Asia might share a startling geometric principle with a site in the Middle East. A vast ceremonial complex found beneath the jungle could reveal trade goods that originated thousands of miles away. This expanding dataset is what allows us to move beyond speculation and into the realm of evidence-based connection. It provides the material to test the grand theory of cultural exchange with a rigor never before possible. We can now trace the spread of ideas not just through a handful of spectacular sites, but through entire cultural landscapes that were, until recently, completely lost to time. The mystery of the megaliths is no longer confined to the past. It is a living field of discovery, where every pass of a laser or a satellite brings us closer to hearing the full, global story these stones have been waiting to tell. This global pattern of stone is undeniable, but the map is also defined by its striking absences. For all its apparent reach, the megalithic phenomenon did not wash over the entire ancient world like a uniform tide. In the fertile river valleys of Mesopotamia between the Tigris and Euphrates, civilization rose to staggering heights. They built the towering ziggurats, immense stepped pyramids that served as temples and administrative centers. Yet these were not made from monolithic stone, but from millions of sun-dried mud bricks, often faced with baked brick. Their monumentality was achieved through volume and repetition, not through the movement of single, colossal blocks. Similarly, in the meticulously planned cities of the Indus Valley, like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, we find advanced urban planning, sophisticated drainage, and impressive architecture, but again in baked brick. They had no apparent tradition of raising standing stones or building chambered tombs from Cyclopean slabs. This selective adoption is not a mark of superiority or inferiority, but a critical clue. It tells us that the exchange of megalithic technology was not a passive infection, but a conscious choice. The idea required a receptive host, a culture for whom it solved a specific problem or fulfilled a deep-seated need that their current toolkit could not. The material itself had to resonate. In regions like Mesopotamia and the Indus Valley, the primary building material was alluvial silt, the rich mud deposited by the great rivers. Brick was the logical, brilliant innovation, a way to turn abundant earth into durable, standardized blocks. Their monumental language was one of molded clay, fired in kilns and assembled by the thousands. To adopt a megalithic approach would have meant abandoning their efficient, scalable system for one that required seeking out distant quarries and moving incomprehensible weights, a solution in search of a problem they did not have. Beyond materials, the idea had to align with a society's spiritual and social architecture, a culture that venerated ancestors as immediate, tangible presences in the landscape might find the concept of a permanent stone tomb profoundly compelling. Another society whose cosmology centered on celestial gods best approached on high platforms might see the ziggurat as the perfect bridge to heaven. The megalithic package, with its focus on earthly alignment and ancestral chambers, simply might not fit. Furthermore, the colossal undertaking demanded a specific social agreement. It required a community structure that could mobilize and sustain a large workforce for a long-term, non-utilitarian goal. Some complex societies were organized around different principles, perhaps more centralized bureaucratic control focused on irrigation, grain storage, and defense, where labor was directed toward immediate infrastructural needs. The decision to build in stone was therefore a cultural filter. It spread where local beliefs about death, memory, and the cosmos created a perfect vacancy for it, where the landscape offered the right stone, and where the social engine was primed for a project that would define the community for generations. Its absence across vast swaths of the advanced ancient world is not a mystery, but a testament to the diversity of human ingenuity. It reminds us that our ancestors were not blank slates waiting for instruction, but discerning cultures who adopted only the foreign ideas that spoke directly to their own hearts, their own skies, and their own understanding of what it means to leave a mark upon the earth. The stones were abandoned, but their lessons were not lost. The profound legacy of this ancient exchange is woven into the very fabric of later civilizations, often in ways we barely recognize. Those early experiments with leverage and balance, perfected over millennia of moving monoliths, became foundational engineering principles. The simple wooden roller and the lever are direct ancestors of the complex cranes and pulley systems that built the classical world. When Greek architects designed their majestic temples, they were standing on a mountain of accumulated stone working wisdom, a knowledge of how to dress, lift, and fit massive blocks that had been refined across continents long before the first column was raised at Delphi. This was not a sudden invention, but a slow inheritance. The organizational genius required for megalithic projects set a powerful precedent. Mobilizing hundreds, perhaps thousands, of people for a single, non-utilitarian goal was a social innovation of the highest order. It created a blueprint for large-scale cooperation that would later be adopted and amplified by the first states. The logistical frameworks developed to feed, house, and coordinate the builders of a stone circle were the prototypes for the even more immense bureaucracies that would later orchestrate the construction of the Egyptian pyramids or the Great Wall of China. These later projects were not entirely new ideas. They were the scaling up of a social technology first pioneered by communities raising stones for their ancestors. The model of communal labor for a transcendent purpose proved to be one of humanity's most enduring and powerful tools. Perhaps the most direct lineage runs through the silent observation of the sky. The patient, generations-long work of megalithic astronomer priests who tracked solstices and lunar cycles with nothing but horizon markers and memory, established the bedrock of empirical science. They were the first to systematically record the rhythms of the cosmos, transforming awe into data. This accumulated celestial knowledge did not vanish. It became the precious seed stock for later Babylonian astronomers charting the planets, for Greek philosophers contemplating the nature of the universe, and for navigators of every age who used the stars to find their way. The impulse to understand and align with the heavens, so literally set in stone, is a continuous thread in human intellectual history. Even the aesthetic power of monumental stone echoed through the ages. The overwhelming sense of permanence and grandeur evoked by a circle of standing stones found new expression in the soaring columns of Greek temples, which aimed to create a similar feeling of divine order and human aspiration. That same impulse traveled through Roman architecture and into the very bones of medieval cathedrals, whose vast naves and stone vaults inspire a kind of reverent awe not so different from what one might feel in the chamber of a 5,000-year-old tomb. The materials and the specific gods changed, but the underlying human desire to create a space that lifts the spirit and dwarfs the individual remained a constant drive. Ultimately, the megalithic pioneers, whether connected by long voyages or united only by common instinct, authored a foundational chapter in our species' story. They demonstrated that we could reshape our environment on a colossal scale to reflect our deepest beliefs about memory, the cosmos, and our place within it. They proved that community could achieve the seemingly impossible. This chapter never truly ended. Its influence simply flowed into new channels, informing our engineering, our science, our social organization, and our eternal search for meaning through beauty and scale. The silent stones, therefore, are not relics of a forgotten past. They are the first sentences in a long story we are still writing today, a story about what it means to be human in a vast and mysterious world. The scattered stones are not a puzzle with a single missing piece. Instead, they form a vast and intricate mosaic, a picture of a world humming with quiet connections. When we step back and synthesize all the evidence, from the genetic trails to the shared astronomical alignments, the most compelling model emerges. It is not a story of a single lost teacher, nor is it a tale of pure, independent coincidence. It is the story of a networked ancient world. This was a planet where humanity, long before empires and written treaties, was linked by a fragile but resilient web of contact. Think of it not as a global civilization, but as a slow-motion internet of ideas. Knowledge did not travel at the speed of light, but at the speed of a sail catching the wind or a family's journey on foot across a steppe. Through sporadic but deeply impactful contacts, key concepts about stone, sky, and society were transferred. A master builder's technique shared on a foreign shore, a priest's star law exchanged during a seasonal gathering, a migrating group's tradition of honoring ancestors with a specific stone form. These were the data packets of this ancient network. Each encounter was a node in the web. When a new community received an idea, they did not simply copy it. They hybridized it. They took the core principle and reinvented it using their local stone, adapting it to fit their own landscape, their own social structure, and their own spiritual beliefs. The Corbelled Vault in Ireland, the Nurag Tower in Sardinia, and the Dolmen in Korea are not failures of exact copying. They are brilliant successes of local innovation. They show an idea being actively engaged with, made meaningful in a new context. This process of adoption and adaptation is the hallmark of a living network, not a dying command from a central source. This model paints a profoundly human picture of prehistory. It suggests our ancestors were more interconnected, more curious, and more capable of sharing complex concepts across vast divides than our traditional histories often allow. They were not isolated tribes staring fearfully at their own horizons. They were navigators, traders, migrants, and storytellers, driven by necessity, opportunity, and a deep-seated desire to understand their place in the cosmos. The occasional, long-distance voyage was not an impossibility, but a daring extension of normal coastal travel. The slow diffusion of ideas along migration routes was not an anomaly, but the constant background hum of human movement. In this light, the global pattern of megaliths becomes less mysterious and more magnificent. It is the archaeological signature of countless conversations, some brief, some lasting generations that spanned continents and oceans. The stones are the permanent record of moments when one group's solution to a universal human question resonated so powerfully that it inspired another, far away, to answer in their own unique voice. This networked world was fragile, its connections thin and easily broken by time, but its legacy is set in stone, a testament to a deep and ancient human impulse to connect, to learn, and to build together. The quest to understand these stones ultimately reveals less about a single, lost civilization and more about the incredible ingenuity and connectivity of our shared human ancestors. From the solstice-aligned henges of Europe to the silent moai of the Pacific, these are not monuments to isolation, but to a deep-seated and perhaps universal human desire to reach for the eternal. This profound impulse, this need to make a permanent mark and align our lives with the cosmos, appears to be a common thread in the human story. What traveled across oceans and continents may not have been a detailed blueprint, but the spark of the idea itself, carried on the slow currents of trade, migration, and shared spiritual yearning. A trader might share a story of a tomb that captures the sunrise. A migrating group brings the tradition of honoring elders with a stone table. A master builder demonstrates the clever trick of a lever and a roller. Each encounter was a node in a vast, ancient network, a fragile web of connection that allowed this powerful concept to take root and flourish in wildly different soils. While many mysteries remain, the growing evidence from genetics, archaeology, and astronomy paints a picture of a dynamic, interactive ancient world, far more conversational than we once believed. We are left not with a solved puzzle, but with a profound respect for these master builders. They teach us that the drive to create something larger than ourselves, to connect with those who came before, and to comprehend our place under the stars is a truly universal human trait. The stones are their legacy, a silent but enduring language that continues to speak across the millennia, reminding us of what we can achieve when we work together toward a common, staggering vision.